Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. This time we're tackling The Shawshank Redemption, a movie that kind of snuck up on everyone, becoming this massive cultural phenomenon.
A classic,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And, to help us break it all down, we'll be looking at Roger Ebert's review. He actually wrote it 5 years after the film came out, so it's interesting to see how he captured that whole slow burn to success thing.
Oh, yeah, his perspective's great for that. Shawshank really proves how a movie can connect with people over time,
Yeah.
building that word of mouth buzz and ultimately topping all those film rankings.
It's pretty wild when you think about it. I mean, it wasn't a hit right away.
Not at all.
But one thing that struck me in Ebert's review is how he points out the unusual way the story's told. We're focused on Andy Dufresne, but we never actually see things through his eyes.
Right. It's Red, played by Morgan Freeman, who's kind of our guide through the whole thing.
Exactly.
His narration and point of view, that's what pulls us in, makes you feel like you're right there in the prison with him.
And Ebert talks about this warm hold the movie has on our feelings, and I think that's a big part of it. We connect with Red, so we experience the whole thing through him.
You're not just watching Andy's story from a distance. You're right there with Red. You feel like part of that prison community.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes more than just your typical prison movie. It's about so much more, that resilience, staying true to yourself, even when things are rough, to put it mildly.
And it does all that without big action scenes or getting overly dramatic.
Right.
The power is in those quieter moments, the conversations between characters, how violence is shown very subtly.
That actually brings up something else Ebert mentioned, the mystery surrounding Andy Dufresne. We're never told for sure if he did it, if he's guilty. And why is he so reserved? How does he maintain this sense of, I don't know, almost freedom inside prison?
It's like those questions stick with you long after the movie's over.
They do.
And maybe that's part of what makes it so good, keeps you thinking, debating it even.
Ebert even says that not knowing everything about a character makes him more interesting. Do you think that's true here? Does the movie find that right balance between mystery and, actually giving us answers?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's something I've thought about a lot myself. On one hand, that ambiguity about Andy, it definitely adds to the intrigue, makes you analyze things, come up with your own theories. But then again, some people might get frustrated. They want concrete answers.
Yeah, it could go either way.
Yeah.
For me, I think it works, but I can see how it wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea.
For sure. But I think even if we don't get every answer, we still connect with Andy's struggle. That quiet strength he has and how much he believes in redemption.
Totally. Which actually brings us to the title itself, The Shawshank Redemption. It's not really about Andy's escape, is it?
No, not directly.
It's about something deeper.
It's a more personal kind of redemption. While Andy's the one who plans the escape, it's Red who really changes the most.
Oh, interesting.
He's the one grappling with what freedom even means both inside prison and out in the world.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. The title's subtly shifting our focus to Red's journey.
Clever, right. Adds a whole other layer to how the story's told.
Definitely. Speaking of layers, I want to talk about how this movie became so successful. Because it didn't start out that way at all. Ebert even points out all the obstacles it faced. The title, it's not exactly a box office grabber.
Yeah, and the whole prison genre, not usually a huge draw for everyone either.
Plus, there's not a ton of action, and it's over 2 hours long.
Which, back then, was a big risk for a movie trying to appeal to a wide audience.
You'd think it was doomed to fail.
Seriously.
But then, it found its audience. Not in theaters, but through word of mouth, those late-night TV showings, video rentals.
It shows the power of a good story. It connected with people on a genuine level. They felt for the characters, thought about the themes, and they told others, and it just built from there. It's a good reminder that sometimes the best stories take their time. They ask you to slow down, savor the moments.
And The Shawshank Redemption does that beautifully. It connects on a personal level, doesn't it?
It really does.
So, before we move on, let's go back to something you touched on earlier about the film's deliberate pacing. Ebert praises this, saying it lets us really savor those moments and connect with the characters more deeply.
We're absolutely right. It's like the film is inviting us to just slow down, to breathe, and really take it all in. Which, these days, you don't see that a lot in movies.
I know, right? It's almost like it's pushing back against how fast-paced everything is.
Exactly. It's like it's saying, hey, just pause for a second. Reflect. There's beauty in just being still and thinking things over.
You know what that reminds me of? That scene where Andy plays the Mozart record over the prison loudspeaker.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a short moment of beauty, this transcendence that breaks through all the bleakness of prison life.
It is. And the film doesn't rush it, does it? It lets the music wash over you, shows how it affects the prisoners. You really feel the weight of that moment. And because of that, it becomes this really powerful and moving experience.
It's like we're right there with the prisoners, experiencing it all with them, the awe, the wonder.
Exactly. It's this shared moment of humanity. Even in that oppressive environment, there's still room for beauty, for connection, for hope.
And that's a message that speaks to everyone, I think, no matter who you are or what you've been through. We all want those moments of connection. We want to feel like there's something bigger than just ourselves.
And that's what the Shawshank Redemption reminds us of, that even when things seem hopeless, those moments are still possible.
I love that. It's so hopeful and empowering. But before we get too carried away with the feels, let's get into some of the actual techniques that Darabont uses to create this sense of hope and transcendence.
Yeah, let's look at how he does it. One big thing is how violence is handled in the movie. It doesn't try to make it sensational or anything. It's very subtle about showing the emotional and psychological toll it takes.
Oh, yeah. Like those scenes when Andy gets beaten up or those moments right after something really brutal has happened. The camera doesn't zoom in on the injuries or anything. It focuses on how the characters are reacting, the quiet despair, how they're trying to hold on to their dignity even when they're being treated so badly.
You're so right. It's like the film is acknowledging that something awful happened without exploiting it.
Yeah,
Those scenes, they make you think about what violence does to people, you know? It breaks them down, takes away their hope, leaves scars that don't always show. That's a much stronger message than just showing the violence itself.
definitely. It shows how good of a director Darabont is, that he can get across these complicated ideas without being over the top about it.
I agree. And that restraint carries over to the dialogue, too.
Right.
There aren't any big speeches or grand pronouncements, you know? It's all very quiet, the characters sharing their hopes and fears in these vulnerable moments.
It's like they're whispering secrets to each other, and we're leaning in to listen. That intimacy just draws you deeper into their world.
Totally. And that trust is so important for a film that's trying to explore these big themes of hope and redemption.
It's like the film is saying, come closer. Let's share this story together. Let's find some hope in all this darkness.
I love that. It shows how powerful storytelling can be. It creates connection and understanding even when people's experiences are totally different.
Okay, so we've talked about how the story is told, the mystery of Andy, how it became this slow-burning success, and how the pacing is so deliberate. What should we dive into next?
Let's talk about the warden. He's more than just your average bad guy, you know? He's complicated, driven by this messed up sense of right and wrong. Ebert even says that bad guys can be nuanced, and the warden is a perfect example of that. He's fascinating.
Oh yeah, I'm totally down to unpack that. Let's talk about how the warden represents more than just plain evil next time.
Welcome back. You know, before we get to the warden, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, about how the movie makes you feel hopeful, even though it's set in a prison.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how it does that. How do you create a feeling of hope in such a bleak place?
Well, one way is how they show violence. Instead of focusing on the brutality, the film looks at the emotional impact, you know? It respects the character's dignity, even in these really vulnerable moments. Like, remember that scene after Andy gets beaten? The camera doesn't zoom in on his injuries or anything.
Right.
It kind of gives him space, just like the other prisoners do.
Yeah, you're right. It's like the film is saying, this was terrible, but it doesn't exploit it for drama.
Exactly. And because of that, those scenes are even more powerful. You're forced to think about the lasting impact of what happened, not just the violence itself.
It makes you really reflect on it, yeah.
Yeah.
And its respect for the characters, it even extends to the guys who seem like the bad guys at first, doesn't it? Like the warden, he's not just evil, he's complicated.
That's a great point. Ebert talks about this too, how even villains can be nuanced. The warden, he's not just bad. He's got this warped sense of morality, you know? He's clinging to power and control.
He represents that whole system that's corrupted. It's more about keeping things in order than actually being fair.
Exactly. So by making him complex, the movie asks us to think about those bigger issues, not just one guy being bad.
It makes you think about how power can corrupt anyone, even people who start out with good intentions.
For sure. And this idea of subtle complexity, it connects to something else Ebert points out, how important the small details are in this film. He mentions those deep, bass sounds during the opening murder scene,
Oh, yeah.
and how those same sounds come back subtly when a young prisoner is describing what someone else told him about the crime.
I remember that. It's so small you could easily miss it the first time you watch it. But it adds this whole other layer connecting these moments that seem separate.
It shows how good Darabont is as a director. He knows how to use suggestion, trusting the audience to put things together without hitting them over the head with it.
He's treating us like we're smart, like we can figure things out.
Yeah.
It makes you want to pay attention,
Yeah.
It makes it more fun to watch.
Definitely. You're constantly thinking, trying to figure things out, making your own conclusions. It's a sign of respect for the audience, I think.
Speaking of doing things well, I want to talk about the visuals and how the movie sounds. Ebert says that the cinematography is tactful, not showy, and I think that's a good way to put it. What do you think about how the movie uses visuals to tell the story?
Oh, the camera work is amazing. It captures how bleak prison life is, but it also shows those little bits of beauty and hope. Think about those shots of Andy looking up at the sky through that tiny window in his cell, or the way the light comes into the library after he expands it.
It's like those visuals are saying so much without words.
They do.
They show this longing, this hope that persists even in the worst place imaginable.
And they do it without being over the top. The visuals work with the story, making it richer without taking over.
And we can't forget the music. Thomas Newman's score. It just fits perfectly with the movie's emotional arc.
The score is like its own character, isn't it? It swells up with hope when Andy has a victory, gets quiet and sad during the losses, and there's this undercurrent of resilience that reflects what the characters are going through.
I like that it's like the score is expressing the emotions that the characters can't always say out loud.
Exactly. It all adds to how the movie stays with you. The story, the acting, the cinematography, the music, it all comes together to create something unforgettable.
One thing that always gets me is the ending. It's both hopeful and kind of sad at the same time. Ebert says that last part, where Andy helps Red accept his freedom, is deeply moving.
Oh, I agree completely. It's especially powerful because we're seeing Red change through his own eyes. We see him struggling with being outside prison, being scared of what he doesn't know, trying to fit into a world that's familiar but also really different.
I remember that line he has. These walls are funny. First you hate them, then you get used to them. Enough time passes, gets you to depend on them. That's institutionalized.
Yeah, that's such a good line. It shows how being in prison can mess with your mind. Red's been there so long, the outside world is terrifying to him. But Andy keeps believing in him. Those letters and postcards he sends. They give Red the courage to finally take that step.
It reminds you that real freedom isn't just about not being locked up. It's about finding your purpose, connecting with people, living life on your own terms. And sometimes you need someone to help you get there, even if they're far away.
And that last shot of Red walking toward the Pacific Ocean, so iconic. It's full of hope, like a promise of a new beginning.
That shot always gets me. It's like this visual metaphor for how strong the human spirit can be. No matter what you go through, you can overcome it and find redemption.
It's a powerful reminder that the movie gives you.
But, there's this sad part too. Brooks, the old librarian.
Oh, yeah.
What happened to him is so tragic. He couldn't handle being free, all the changes in the world. It's a reminder of how hard it is to come back to society after being locked up for so long.
It's heartbreaking. It shows how important it is to have support when you get out of prison. People need compassion and understanding as they try to rebuild their lives.
Absolutely. Brooks's story makes the movie's exploration of freedom and redemption even more complicated. It's not as simple as just opening the prison gates. We need to do better as a society to help people who've been in prison.
It's a powerful message, and it's relevant for everyone, not just people who've been incarcerated. It's about being more understanding and empathetic toward everyone, no matter what they've been through.
We all have a story.
Yeah.
Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect.
Exactly. And that's what makes The Shawshank Redemption so powerful. It goes beyond just entertaining you. It makes you confront your own biases and think about how we can all be more inclusive and compassionate.
You're right. It's a message that feels especially important today when things are so divided.
It is. It reminds us that we're all connected, we all have struggles, and we all deserve compassion. I think that message, that sense of interconnectedness, is a big part of why people still love this movie so much. It's set in a prison, but it's really about that universal human desire for freedom. Not just physical freedom, but freedom to think, to hope, to dream.
It's about finding that strength inside you, that spark of hope that keeps you going even when things are really tough.
And the movie shows you that you don't have to be a superhero to have that strength. We all have it inside us.
It's a reminder that we can all be resilient, find meaning, even when things are bad. That's a powerful message that resonates with everyone.
Speaking of how it resonates, it's crazy how the Shawshank Redemption is everywhere now, you
Oh,
know?
yeah.
People quote it all the time. The images are so recognizable, and those themes are still relevant today. It's become more than just a movie.
It's like a cultural touchstone, a symbol of hope.
I think part of that is because it became popular slowly. It wasn't a huge hit right away. It built over time through people telling each other about it. That says a lot about how genuine it
It
is.
wasn't some big marketing campaign. It just connected with people on a real level.
And people are still discovering it today, sharing it, finding comfort and inspiration in it. It's a reminder that great art can last forever. You know, it can speak to people across generations.
So what do you think it is about The Shawshank Redemption that makes it more than just a prison movie? What makes people keep coming back to it?
I think it's because it speaks to something universal in all of us. It's about hope, friendship, never giving up. It's about believing that even in the darkest times, you can find redemption. Those are things that will always be relevant no matter who you are or when you live.
And it's not just the themes, right? The characters are so well written.
Oh, yeah.
They feel real. They have flaws. You can relate to them.
Definitely. You see yourself in their struggles, how they succeed, how they try to become better people. It makes you think about your own life, what you believe in. It makes you think about what freedom really means, both inside and outside. And it shows you that even when things are really bad, the human spirit can survive and even thrive.
It's a powerful message, one that's worth remembering, especially when you're going through a hard time.
I completely agree. It reminds you that hope matters, connecting with people matters, and the human spirit is stronger than you think. We can all use that reminder. You know, listening to you talk about this movie, it's amazing how much there is to uncover. It's so much more than just an escape story. It is. It's about freedom, hope, friendship, and the human spirit's ability to never give up.
It shows you that even when you're trapped, you can still find ways to be free. And it does that through kindness, creativity, friendship, that belief that things can get better.
And those are the things that set the characters free in the end. It's not about breaking out of a physical prison. It's about breaking free from despair and cynicism.
It's about choosing to have hope, even when it seems impossible. And the movie shows you how to do that, how to find those little bits of light in the darkness.
Like Andy. He never gives up on his dream of freedom, even after all that time in solitary confinement.
Yeah, he finds comfort in music, in books, in being kind to others.
And those little acts of kindness, they spread, right?
They do.
They inspire hope in the people around him, like how he helps Red learn to read, how he creates that library, how he brings that beautiful opera music to the prison.
It's like those small things are acts of rebellion against how dehumanizing prison is.
They are. They remind you that even in the worst places, there's still humanity, connection, beauty.
And that's such an important message, especially for people who are struggling or feel trapped.
Totally. The Shawshank Redemption tells you that you always have a choice. You can choose hope over giving up, action over doing nothing, connection over being alone.
And that even small acts of kindness can make a difference, both for yourself and the people around you.
It reminds you that we're all connected, what you do matters, and you can change things even in small ways.
Absolutely. It's a call to action, to make things better even when the world feels messed up.
It's about realizing that true freedom isn't just about escaping physical limits, but about freeing yourself from negativity and despair.
It's about finding that strength inside you, that hope that helps you keep going even when things are unbelievably hard. And the Shawshank Redemption shows that anyone can have that strength, not just special people.
It's in all of us.
It's a reminder that we can all be resilient, find meaning even in the middle of suffering. It's humbling and empowering at the same time.
It makes you look beyond your own limits, think about how we're all connected, and work towards a world where hope and kindness win. You know, thinking about why this movie is still so popular, it makes me think about how much we need stories that make us believe in humanity again.
Right.
There's so much negativity and cynicism out there. The Shawshank Redemption gives you a little bit of hope.
It reminds you that there are still good people in the world, that even in the worst situations, people choose kindness and strength.
It's a story that feeds your soul. It reminds you that you're not alone and that you can find beauty and meaning even in the most unexpected places.
That's a good antidote to all the negativity that's out there. It reminds you that you have the power to choose hope, to choose connection, to see the good in yourself and others, even when it's difficult.
And that's something worth holding on to, especially now.
Totally. In a world that's so divided, The Shawshank Redemption shows us a vision of unity and compassion. It's a story that goes beyond culture, speaking to something that's in all of us that need to connect, to find meaning, to believe that even when things are dark, there's always hope. And that's a message worth remembering, a message that can inspire us to be better people and more resilient.
It reminds us that we're all connected and that our actions, even small ones, matter. We can create a world where hope and compassion are stronger than anything else.
That's a beautiful thought. But before we finish up this part of our deep dive, let's go back to one of Ebert's main points about why the movie was successful. He talks about Frank Darabont's directing, how he takes his time and tells the story subtly.
Yeah, he says that the film doesn't try to force things or make the story bigger than it needs to be. It lets the characters and their relationships develop naturally.
It's different from a lot of movies today, which rely on fancy editing, special effects, and explosions to keep you interested.
The Shawshank Redemption lets you savor the moments, the characters, how the story unfolds. It doesn't rush you, and that makes it more emotionally powerful.
It's not about throwing a bunch of information or action at you. It's about pulling you in and letting the story happen naturally. You know, it's like we're sitting around a campfire listening to Red tell his story, really feeling his words and emotions.
That's perfect. It's a masterclass in how to tell a story without being flashy. Every detail, every look, every line of dialogue matters.
And that subtlety is there in the acting, too. Tim Robbins is Andy. He's so understated, but you feel his strength and resilience.
He doesn't need to make big speeches or do heroic things to grab your attention. He's magnetic and mysterious, and you can't help but care about what happens to him.
And Morgan Freeman as Red, he's just as good. He brings so much humanity and wisdom to the role. You connect with Red immediately.
His narration is so calming and insightful. He guides you through the story and makes you think about life, freedom, what it means to be human.
And the chemistry between Robbins and Freeman is just incredible.
Oh, yeah.
You totally believe that Andy and Red are friends. Their scenes together are some of the best in the movie.
They show you how powerful friendship can be, how it can help you through anything. It's like you're listening to two old friends talking about life, and you're lucky enough to be part of the conversation.
Exactly. And that feeling of closeness, of shared experience, is what makes The Shawshank Redemption so great. You're not just watching a movie, you're stepping into a whole world.
It shows you the power of a good story, characters that feel real, themes that speak to everyone. It's a movie that becomes something truly timeless.
And with that, we'll wrap up this part of our deep dive. But we're not done yet. When we come back, we'll talk about the movie's legacy, how it's affected our culture, and what it means for us as viewers today. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into The Shawshank Redemption. You know, we've talked a lot about the movie from our perspective, but what about you, the listeners? What sticks with you about this film? What keeps it relevant after all these years?
It's interesting, isn't it? Some stories grab you and never let go. I think Shawshank gets at something really basic in us, that need for connection, for meaning, for something to believe in, especially when things are tough.
Yeah, it's not just a prison break story. It's about how strong the human spirit can be, how we can overcome almost anything.
And it does that without getting preachy or sappy. It lets you decide what it means. You know, it makes you think about your own experiences with hope and resilience.
Ebert even called it a spiritual experience, and I get that. It stays with you. It makes you think about your own life, your own beliefs.
I think it also taps into our desire for justice. You see Andy, wrongly convicted, locked up, treated terribly, but he never loses hope. He never gives up on freedom. And in the end, he wins. He beats the people who tried to crush him.
It's got to be powerful for anyone who's ever felt helpless or trapped.
Yeah.
Right? It's like this reminder that even when the system fails you, even when everything's stacked against you, there's always that little bit of hope.
And The Shawshank Redemption shows that fighting back can look like a lot of different things. Being kind, being creative, being stubborn, refusing to let your situation define you.
And that's what's so great about Andy. He never becomes a victim, you know? He holds on to his dignity, his intelligence, his belief that things can get better, even in that awful place.
He shows that you always have a choice, no matter how impossible things seem. But it's not just about individual strength either. Red changes too, and that's inspiring. He starts out so cynical, but then he finds hope again, gets a fresh start.
His story shows how important it is to connect with other people. Even a little bit of kindness can make a huge difference, can start this chain reaction of hope and positive change.
Remember when Andy plays that Mozart record over the prison speakers?
Oh, yeah.
It's this beautiful moment that breaks through the everyday grimness of prison.
And it's like everyone can finally breathe again. You see it on their faces, that awe, that wonder. It reminds them that there's something inside them that the prison can't touch. Their humanity, their ability to feel joy.
That scene says so much about what the movie's really trying to say. Even in the worst situations, hope, beauty, connection, they can still exist.
And that resonates with everyone, doesn't it? We all want to feel connected, like we're part of something bigger.
Absolutely. And The Shawshank Redemption tells you that you can find those moments even when everything seems bleak.
Ebert said that some movies grab you right away, and others kind of grow on you over time. And he thinks the movies that last, the ones that become classics, they often have this message of hope that might not appeal to everyone at first, but it hits you on a deeper level.
And Shawshank is like that. It sneaks up on you, stays with you, and you find new things in it every time you watch.
It's like a book you can read over and over and still get something new out of it.
Exactly. It makes you think, it makes you talk about it, and it still inspires people all these years later. It's timeless.
It really is a testament to hope, resilience, and what the human spirit can do. And with that, we'll wrap up our deep dive into The Shawshank Redemption. We've covered a lot. How it's structured, the deeper themes, how it uses visuals and music, and why it's still so loved today.
But the real reason this movie is so powerful is because it hits you right in the feels. It reminds you about hope, about how strong we can be, and what we're capable of overcoming.
So next time you're going through something difficult, think about Andy Dufresne and Red. Remember the power of hope, how important it is to have connections and to believe that things can get better. Because even in the darkest times, redemption is always possible.